Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're tackling something pretty huge, consciousness.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and we've got some really interesting sources to help us unpack it. Some excerpts from Spinoza's philosophy, kind of classic stuff,
Right.
and then a more modern take from Vellman's book on consciousness studies. So get ready to explore the mind, maybe question what you think you know about, well, knowing.
I think Spinoza is a great place to start, actually. He asks these really basic questions, but they're still so relevant. Like, how do we know what's actually true?
Yeah, like, is my mind just stuck inside my head, or is it connected to something bigger?
Exactly.
So let's jump right into Spinoza's treatise on the intellect. It's all about his quest for, well, he calls it true knowledge. And he keeps coming back to this idea of adequate ideas. So it's
Right.
like he thinks there are these perfect representations of things out there, but how do we even get those?
Yeah, for Spinoza, it's not enough to just have a vague understanding or, like a personal opinion. An adequate idea has to totally match up with whatever it's representing. No room for doubt.
Oh, okay.
He gives this example like, imagine a semicircle moving. You can't really understand that movement without the concept of a sphere, right?
Oh, I see.
Otherwise, it's like you've got this puzzle piece, but no idea where it fits.
That's a good way to put it. So, like, I might think I understand traffic just by watching cars go by. But what about the whole city's road system, the lights, where everyone's going? I'm only seeing a tiny bit of the whole thing.
Exactly. And Spinoza would probably say that's how we experience a lot of life. We get these little glimpses through our senses, but it's our intellect that has to actually put it all together.
That makes me think, what are the things you feel absolutely certain of in your life? Those core truths. Maybe those are your adequate ideas.
That's a good question.
I bet it's in those areas where you've really, used your brain power, like Spinoza's talking about, to reach a deeper understanding.
That's probably true. And, it's funny, even centuries later, scholars are still debating some of Spinoza's work. Did he really move past Descartes' ideas on will and intellect? Is there some kind of contradiction in how he talks about method?
We're still trying to figure him out.
Exactly.
It's like he dropped these intellectual bombs and we're still sorting through the fallout.
Maybe. But maybe that's the point. Get us thinking, challenging our assumptions.
I like that.
To really grasp Spinoza's view on consciousness, though, we have to tackle one of his big ideas, his view of God.
All right, lay it on me. How does Spinoza's God connect to consciousness?
Well, for Spinoza, God isn't this separate being like up in the clouds ruling the universe. God is the universe,
Okay.
the one like fundamental reality that everything comes from.
So everything's like connected?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really wild.
Uh-oh.
Spinoza thinks true ideas, those adequate ideas we talked about, they exist in God. And they're eternal, just like God.
Wait, hold on. You're saying my thoughts, if they're true, are somehow like part of the universe's fabric.
That's what he's suggesting. Like a piece of us, maybe our consciousness goes beyond our physical limits.
Wow. Okay, I need a minute to think about that. If true ideas are eternal, part of this like grand substance, what does that even mean for us? Are we just like temporary blips in this substance, or is there something more to our consciousness?
Those are some big questions that Spinoza brings up. To explore those more, maybe we should bring in a more modern viewpoint.
Yeah, because I'm ready for a different angle on this whole consciousness thing.
All right, let's jump ahead a few centuries. Let's look at Max Vellman's book, Understanding Consciousness. It's a more scientific approach, and Vellman's really takes on this whole consciousness brain problem.
So like, how does our physical brain create this non-physical experience of, well, being conscious?
Yeah. And he starts by saying there are multiple consciousness brain problems, not just one. Like, what even is consciousness? Where is it? How does it interact with the world? Does it cause things to happen? Or is it just a byproduct of our brains doing their thing?
Those are some big questions.
Right.
I'm guessing there are no easy answers.
Nope.
So how does Vellman's even approach this?
He looks at a lot of different theories. Dualism, which says mind and body are separate things. Materialism, where the mind is just a product of the brain. But he ends up supporting what he calls a reflexive model of consciousness.
Reflexive, what's that?
Well, the idea is that consciousness is both in the brain and about the world around us. It's not just an internal thing, it's actively engaged with our environment.
There's not one or the other, it's both.
Right. Think about it. Your visual experience is shaped by your brain, but also by what you're actually seeing. It's not just light hitting your retina. Your brain is interpreting that information, making sense of it.
So it's this, like, feedback loop between my brain and the world. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. But how does that help us solve this bigger mystery of what consciousness is? That's where things get even more interesting. Velleman's doesn't say he's got it all figured out, but, this idea that consciousness is both internal and external, it really makes you rethink things.
So if it's not just locked away in our brains,
Yeah.
how does that work with Spinoza's ideas? We
Well-
were talking about God as this one substance and our thoughts being a part of it.
That's where the two kind of come together in a cool way. Remember, Spinoza sees everything, thoughts, the physical world, our minds, as coming from this one underlying substance. Like, we're all waves in this giant ocean of consciousness.
I'm starting to get it. So for Spinoza, my mind isn't separate from the universe. It's woven right in.
Exactly. And that changes how we think about the relationship between, consciousness and the physical world. It's not a one-way street, the brain just producing consciousness.
Yeah.
They're intertwined, two sides of the same thing.
But then, what about free will? If my thoughts are ultimately expressions of this one substance, does that mean I'm not really in control?
That's a big debate with Spinoza. Some people see his philosophy as deterministic, like everything's already decided. But others say there's room for a kind of freedom within this interconnected reality.
So not puppets on strings, but maybe dancers. We can choose our steps, but we're still dancing to the music within the space with the other dancers.
I like that. And speaking of things being a bit tricky, remember how we were saying that even experts debate some parts of Spinoza's work? You mentioned something about his idea of method being controversial.
Oh, right.
His idea of how we get to true knowledge can seem, kind of contradictory. On the one hand, he says true ideas are self-evident, they have their own proof built in, but he also gives us this whole method for reaching them.
So which is it? Do we need a method, or are true ideas just, obvious?
That's the debate. Some scholars think Spinoza's method is more about, clarifying our understanding, getting rid of false beliefs. It's like true ideas are diamonds, they're valuable, but you need the right tools to dig them up.
So it's not about finding truth, it's about recognizing it. It's already there, we just have to see it.
Right. Spinoza thought we're capable of understanding those true eternal ideas, but our minds can get clouded. Prejudice, emotions, limited experiences. His method is like cleaning all that up so the truth can shine through.
Makes sense. But then, if we're capable of grasping these big, true, eternal ideas, why do we still mess up? Why do we get things wrong if our minds are part of this, perfect divine substance?
That's where Spinoza's inadequate ideas come in. He says those mistakes, those partial understandings, come from our limited perspective. It's like we're each a tiny piece of a huge puzzle, only seeing our own little section.
So we're these tiny bits of consciousness trying to see the whole picture, but we're limited by our own viewpoint.
Yeah, we don't have access to all of reality, so our perceptions get distorted, and that leads to those inadequate ideas.
That's kind of humbling, actually. But it also makes me wonder, how do we get past those limitations? Can we ever glimpse the bigger picture, that universal consciousness Spinoza is talking about?
Great question. And that brings us back to Velleman's, with his scientific perspective. He doesn't use the concept of God, like Spinoza, but he also sees that our individual consciousness might not be the whole story.
Okay, back to Velleman's then. What does he say about this quest for a bigger view of consciousness?
One thing he points out is that traditionally, science has looked at consciousness in a pretty narrow way, focused on it being just an internal thing.
So instead of just looking in our heads, Velleman's wants us to consider how consciousness interacts with the whole world around us.
Yeah. We got to move away from this idea of consciousness as a passenger, just along for the ride in our brains.
Okay, I'm ready for Velleman's to shake things up. So what does he propose instead?
Remember the reflexive model? That's where it gets interesting. Consciousness is both a product of the brain and a shaper of our experience. It's not passive. It's actively involved in making our reality.
So there's this two-way street, consciousness interacting with our brains and the world, shaping and being shaped.
Exactly. It's not just that my brain is making my conscious experience. My conscious experience is also feeding back into my brain, affecting how I see and interact with the world.
Mind-blowing. It changes that whole my brain is in control idea.
Uh-huh.
So if consciousness is this active force, does that mean I can choose to change my brain, my perceptions, my reality?
That's the question that leads us to some even deeper mysteries. But before we go there, there's one more thing Velmans brings up that's important. He points out that our view of the physical world is like this closed system where everything's determined by physical laws. Well, it might not be the whole picture.
Oh, okay.
He brings up some stuff from quantum mechanics that suggests there could be room for something else.
Like what?
Something non-physical, like maybe consciousness, actually having an effect on the physical world.
Whoa. So there might be more to reality than we can currently wrap our heads around. Like a whole other level where consciousness is actually shaping things.
That's what some scientists are looking to. We don't have all the answers, but there's more and more evidence that our thoughts, our intentions, even our beliefs can have a real impact on our bodies, on the world.
That's so cool. Like we're just starting to understand what it means to be human, what our minds can really do.
Definitely a lot to explore. I think the main takeaway as we wrap up this deep dive is that consciousness is way more complex, way more mysterious than we usually think. It's not just a side effect of our brains, it's something fundamental to reality itself, woven into like the fabric of existence.
This has been amazing. Spinoza's, Velmans, all these big ideas. It feels like we just dipped our toes into this whole ocean of a topic.
Right. And that's the best part. There's always more to learn, more questions to ask, more to think about. Hopefully this has given you some new ways of seeing things and sparked your own curiosity to keep exploring consciousness.
It definitely has for me. We've gone from Spinoza's vision of a universe that's like infused with consciousness to Velman's scientific view of this dynamic force that's shaping our experience. And maybe, just maybe, we've caught a glimpse of something really profound about who we are and the universe we live in.
So as you go about your day, pay attention to those moments of awareness, those little flashes of insight. Your consciousness is powerful, and maybe it's even more connected to everything than you ever imagined.
I love that. A huge thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive into consciousness. We hope you'll keep asking those big questions, keep exploring the incredible world of the mind within, and until next time, keep diving deep.